Hey, y'all, each week on The Sam Sanders Show from KCRW, we ask big questions and share hot takes about the pop culture we love.
Now that we have YouTube, we don't need any more biopics. If they've been alive such that I can watch them on YouTube, I don't need it.
I don't think that music is getting worse. I think y'all just don't listen to artists who aren't in the mainstream.
Taylor Swift, retire. It's time to retire.
The Sam Sanders Show from KCRW, wherever you get your podcast, and on YouTube.
My strategy is to make beautiful pictures out of these. I want to get people's attention. I want people to look at these things and be forced to look at them and then contemplate what they're looking at.
You're listening to Life in 7 Songs. I'm your host, Sophie Behrman from the San Francisco Standard. Our guest this week is the American photographer Richard Misirlou, one of the most influential visual artists of our time. His work is housed in the collections of MoMA, the Whitney, and the Getty, and the New York Times has written, quote, "Don't let the beauty of his photographs fool you." Misirlou first picked up a camera at UC Berkeley in the late 1960s, capturing Vietnam War protests on campus. That instinct to document history never left him. It just shifted. His lens turned from people to landscapes, and in doing so, he redefined the American West. His haunting, large-scale images reveal both the region's splendor and its scars, reshaping the way we see our environment. Richard, welcome to the show.
Thank you. That was a lovely intro.
So you grew up in Los Angeles, and I want to jump right into the music, because your very first song places us there. You chose Bonnie Raitt's Angel from Montgomery. What's the story behind that choice?
There's so much music over the years that I love. But given that our assignment was to kind of think of the soundtrack of our lives, Bonnie Raitt, Jeff Bridges, and I all went to junior high and high school together. And we were in the same age, same group, and we hung out together. And Bonnie and I actually jammed at my house at one point. We were young, but I don't even remember the songs. It was, when we were like 13 years old. Bridges actually was a really good musician. He's actually a really good artist. Both of them were really talented. And so I've been listening to more Bonnie's music lately, Angel of Montgomery, I think is such a beautiful, beautiful song. Just warm and sweet at this moment to think about.
Written by John Prine in 1971 originally.
Yeah.
Make me an angel that flies from Montgomery. Make me a poster of an old rodeo. Just give me one thing I can hold on to believe in this living is just a hard way to go.
I mean, she's still on fire. And by the way, she's always done this bottleneck guitar. Like nobody else can play bottleneck guitar like she does. She's been doing that for decades. I realized after all these years that basically friendships from my childhood have remained so profoundly important. And Jeff and Bonnie are just these two friends that were really creative, really, really creative. That was really important.
Childhood, teenage years, they're such formative times. And so those two, they went on to become a musician and an actor, but you took your own creative drive and you channeled it towards photography. So I'm curious, do you remember the first photograph you ever took?
It's interesting. My father used to be an avid family photographer, and we'd go skiing. Actually, I was a serious skier when I was a kid, and he'd stick the family movie camera in my hand and kind of make me take the pictures of the family. So I think I became really comfortable with a camera early on.
But that was moving image.
That was moving, yeah. What really changed everything, I was going to Berkeley, and there's a place on the Berkeley campus, this is probably around 1967, called the ASUC Studio. And there you could do lithography, etching, ceramics, and photography. I went in to make ceramic ashtrays for my parents for Christmas. But what happened is on the back wall, there was about 10, 15 photographs by a photographer named Roger Minnick, black and white photographs. And I saw those, and it changed my life. I stood in front of them, and I went, oh, my God.
What was it about those images?
These were, I think, his Delta West portrait series. He photographed the Sacramento River Delta, the people that lived there. So they were mostly like portraits, people's hands, but they were beautifully printed, black and white prints. And I hadn't seen anything like that. Something different triggered in me and made me realize what a powerful medium it was. And that began the journey. And I started using the darkroom. And a few years later, I became on the staff at the studio. That's how I supported myself.
So before we dive too deeply into college years, you mentioned that your father, the whole family actually, was really into skiing. But you also chose a song from your teenage years to do with surfing. So was that also a family thing or just something that you did?
Surfing was just for me and my buddies. My parents, my family didn't like that. My family would go skiing, and I was actually more serious as a skier, and I used to race, and I lived to ski. Surfing I wasn't even very good with, but I went with my buddies, and it was a ritual for teenage boys at that point. Every day we go up and down the coast and look for the best waves, which would depend on the direction of the swells or the wind. And there was really famous spots like Rincon or California Street or a place called Little Rincon Mondos. And at that time, I guess this was probably 1960s, early 60s, surf music was the rage. So there was a song called Misirlou by Dick Dale and the Dale Tones, and it became the soundtrack for these trips. And it became the first song I learned on a guitar. And then this last Christmas, I bought my grandson, Oliver, who's 6 years old, a 3-string guitar, and that was the first song I showed him. So it stayed with me my whole life. And I realized many years later, I've had 5 Volkswagen campers in my life where I would just wander the American desert for 2 to 3 weeks at a time, basically kind of like what we did looking for waves, looking for great pictures, meaning finding a landscape that's of interest in the perfect light, you know? And I realized I probably got that discipline from those early surf trips.
There's a huge amount of patience, I can imagine, actually, to choose the right spot, the right waves, the right photograph or lighting.
If you don't do that, it's a waste of film, time, everything. Sometimes I would drive for 4 or 5 hours at a time, just like things are not right, for photographing. Same thing with waves. If the waves were no good, you don't go out. You just don't, there's no reason to. If they're not breaking, they're choppy or something.
So tell me a little bit more about growing up in the 50s and 60s. And in particular, I'm curious how your family took your decision to become a photographer.
Yeah. So my family was in the sporting goods business. My grandfather, Jack, started it. My father went into the business with them. It was, at that time, considered the biggest sporting goods store west of the Mississippi. And my uncle worked there, and, it's kind of a family fair, but it was a big sporting goods store. And I used to work there as a kid. When I decided that I wanted to pursue this photography, back then, you couldn't make a living. My grandfather, who I adored, he was furious with me. He had built this tiny, very modest empire, and I walked away to pursue my own dreams, which were really stupid. And understandably, my father was like, "What are you doing? You've got this thing laid out for you. This is all yours to just take over." And I just was a product of my moment, and it didn't fit theirs. I felt like my father was really mad at me that I didn't go into the Vietnam War, that I burned my draft card. My father was in the army. My grandfather was in World War I. Here we're like going, I'm not going to Vietnam. I'm not fighting in this army. It was such a different moment. And Bob Dylan, I loved everything Bob Dylan. And The Times They Are Changing was the soundtrack for that.
And keep your eyes wide, the chance won't come again. And don't speak too soon, for the wheel's still in spin. And there's no telling who that it's naming. Was the loser, now will be later to win. For the times they are a-changin'.
Up until then, all the beautiful music I ever heard had these gorgeous, pretty voices singing them. But Dylan was able, with an expressive voice, not by any means a pretty voice. In fact, it was kind of grating at times. It was so expressive. I realized, wow, that's how art can work. art doesn't have to be pretty and beautiful to be powerful. It can be raw, and I think I learned that from Dylan.
You mentioned Berkeley. You mentioned seeing these photographs that took you from hobby to sort of art. And then all these protests started breaking out, protests against the war in Vietnam. How was that a catalyst for now not just appreciating art, but picking up a camera and getting to work?
All around me, there's all this politics going on. And I lived right off the Berkeley campus, about 5 blocks down. I would walk down Telegraph Avenue. So I took a camera out. I actually got a billy clubbed because I was taking pictures of the cops doing stuff. So I had some pictures from that. And then I started photographing the street people in Berkeley. That became a whole epic series. I ended up doing a book called Telegraph 3 a.m. And basically there were series portraits that I did of people living on the street with my camera on a tripod.
What statement were you hoping to make with that work, or what impact?
I was trying to bring attention to the fact that all these human beings were living on the streets. It's strange how it mirrors kind of our moment today, but basically put faces on people that I was afraid of. At first, when I was walking down the street, I was intimidated by them. I did the pictures. I made beautiful prints. I created a book. It was shown in New York at the International Center for Photography. And yet, my motivation had been to raise money for the free clinic in Berkeley and things like that. And it didn't do any of that. And I went, And I realized that inadvertently I had exploited the people. I did not mean to, but I was young and innocent. And I did that. My career was taking off and it wasn't helping them. So I kind of rejected that work. I kind of said, okay, my work went a very, very different direction from there.
It's time for a quick break. When we come back, Misirlou follows an unexpected calling, one that starts where the road ends. Stay with us. Hey everyone, I want to recommend a podcast. Hard Knocks is a show about resilience, self-discovery, and finding meaning after chaos, hosted by Amanda Knox. Each week, Amanda sits down with fascinating guests, writers, thinkers, artists, to explore how we learn, grow, and rebuild ourselves after life knocks us down. Amanda brings humor, honesty, and hard-earned perspective to every conversation, drawing on her own experience of being wrongfully convicted and rebuilding her life. Amanda was a guest on Life in 7 Songs in one of our most moving episodes, opening up about how music became a lifeline during her years of wrongful imprisonment. On our show, she spoke candidly about turning pain into wisdom and also about how we're all so much more than our worst moments. If you liked that episode, you'll love her show, available wherever you listen to podcasts.
I'm Jesse Alejandro Cottrell.
And I'm Emily Dreyfus, and this is Pacific Standard Time.
We have stories from all over the state of California, all the big battles that are happening here.
Prop 50,
housing affordability,
tech,
and immigration.
And we're really excited to bring you the stories about how California is dealing with what it means to be alive in 2025.
Subscribe to Pacific Standard Time, a new weekly show from the San Francisco Standard.
We'll have new episodes every Wednesday starting November 19th, wherever you get your podcasts.
Your work heads in a new direction, so where does it take you?
I was moving from kind of street politics to the spiritual. And some reason I got in my head the desert. So I went off into the desert in search of the miraculous. And I actually renamed it In Search of Cactus. And I found a dirt road and I drove off and I ended up in Saguaro National Monument in Arizona. There's these great stands of giant cactus, saguaro cactus. It was like out of a Tolkien book or something. I mean, it's just like a magical, magical place. And I only photographed at night. I started barbecuing these cactus with a strobe, and the pictures were beautiful. And then I went back into the dark room and I experimented and created a whole new language of printing a black and white photograph of using these weird chemicals to make them glow and do turn colors and stuff. They're beautiful. So it was my kind of experimental stage. But then I started noticing in my drives to the desert, all these places where there was pollution and bombing ranges, military stuff and housing that's gone badly or abandoned streets and going, what's going on there? I started seeing this clash between nature and civilization.
Reality.
And a reality that wasn't pretty. And I started getting really interested in that. And so I began my process called the Desert Cantos. Starting in 1979, I photographed man-made fires, man-made floods, space shuttle landings, dead animal pits, military bombing ranges, the nuclear test site, on and on and on. Just I find themes, not in the place that people know, the preserved parks, but the places where people live. And I've tried to document that. And part of my strategy is to make beautiful pictures out of these. I want to get people's attention. I want people to look at these things and be basically forced to look at them and then contemplate what they're looking at.
Is there anything that you listened to in the van as you traveled the desert?
When I drive along these vast desert spots, often there was no radio signal. So I would bring my own CDs or tapes and listen to them. And what became perfect for driving in the desert were the kind of new classical minimalist composers like Philip Glass and in particular Steve Reich. His music, particularly music for 18 musicians, I think that's the title of it. It was perfect desert driving music. Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. To me, I saw a film, of where I'm driving really fast through the desert on these just empty highways. There's nobody anywhere. And a movie camera taking a picture through the window where you can even see the frame of the window, just framing just the movement of sand out there in high speed. I actually did a bunch of films like that with his music as kind of literally the soundtrack to it. I never put it together and showed it, but that was the idea.
So you did do a lot of your travel alone, but eventually you met your wife, Miriam, and she came along on some of these trips. Tell me about meeting her.
I had been married before, and Jake, my son, is from that first marriage. But I met Miriam around 1987, I think, a year after a divorce. And she was actually a writer, and she was writing about my work for Mother Jones magazine, I think it was. And then we kind of hit it off romantically. She was just beautiful, smart. She's French. And we just had so much in common. It was just such a powerful meeting. We actually did a book together, which won a Penn Prize, where she did the writing for the Bravo 20 book. And it's just been really, really wonderful ever since. But there was a time that I remember that symbolizes our relationship, because we've been together now 37 years. We saw a video of La Vie en Rose, the French song that was done by Grace Jones. And Miriam started singing and dancing with it. And she has a beautiful voice, but she's really shy about it. But she just couldn't help it, and she just let it rip in French. And so it was just so beautiful. And it's lodged in my brain forever.
Let's listen. This is the cover of La Vie en Rose, originally by Edith Piaf.
Oh, il me prend dans ses bras, il met pas le haut bas, je vois la vie en rose. Il m'a dit des mots d'amour, des mots de tous les jours, et ça me fait quelque chose.
You mentioned that you and your wife wrote a book about Bravo 20 together. What is that project?
So Bravo 20 was a bombing range that the Navy had been bombing illegally. It was northern Paiute Indian land in Nevada. And the Navy, after World War II, kind of took it over for bombing practice and then just decimated. There's a volcanic mound there called Lone Rock. The Paiutes called it Wolf's Head. They had bombed it down from 260 feet to 160 feet over the years, which was just terrible. And there's thousands of unexploded bombs everywhere. And they're sometimes buried beneath the sand, so you have to be really careful. And there's thousands of craters. And so I photographed it thoroughly. Miriam wrote a 30,000-word essay with the whole history of the place and what happened there. So it was a great collaboration. It was an important book.
Richard, I know Miriam once called one of your photographs beautiful. This is earlier on in your relationship. And you told her, beautiful is an empty signifier. What did you mean by that?
Good question. You don't want your work to be pretty. You want it could be beautiful, meaning poignant, but not pretty, which is kind of lightweight and just decorative. I go to a great length to make beautiful photographs, but built in there's got to be a message that gets through to people, or I try to anyway. That's the hope. That's what makes the difference between a great image and just interesting content.
So your next song comes from an experience you had at Berkeley. You studied psychology there, and as part of that major, you volunteered at the Napa State Mental Hospital. Tell me about that.
It was a volunteer, kind of older brother mentor kind of thing. And I ended up having two young teenage kids. One was Ron and one was Gail, I think it was. And Ron was somebody that just desperately, painfully shy, incredibly withdrawn. But he loved to teach. There was a piano at the Napa State Mental Hospital, and he would sit down and he would play. He was unbelievable. And then I just sat down on the bench next to him, and he said, "You want, you want to try?" And he would show me a little thing, and I would go to boom, kind of thing. And okay, now try that. Boom, 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 boom. And then before you know it, but he was so patient, and he was so generous and so giving. It was beautiful. And ironically, he ended up teaching me how to play the piano, songs by McCoy, Tyner, that are really complicated jazz things. And in a weird way, him helping me was the therapy for him. It empowered him, I guess, to help me. It was beautiful. It was really beautiful.
Let's take a listen to McCoy Tyner's Effendi.
If you listen to McCoy Tyner, he starts with something simple, and before you know it, it is transforming, and then boom, he just takes off, and it's never the same again.
And then many decades later, you were commissioned to decorate a wing of UCSF's psychiatry building in San Francisco, and you drew on that early experience to create the artwork for the psych wing. Tell me about that whole experience.
I did a whole series that was inspired by the things that Ron taught me for the UCSF Pritzker building, psychiatry building in San Francisco. It's called Reef Riffs for Ron. I took one photograph from the Oregon coast, and I put it in Photoshop, and then I started transforming the colors of it. I basically took one single image and riffed on it. I'm using the jazz metaphor on purpose, and the images were based on that model of a jazz riff that I never would have even considered if it hadn't been for Ron.
So I want to talk about an ongoing series that you have called On the Beach. How did that start?
I was in Washington, D.C. when 9/11 happened, and my son was in a dorm in NYU. So we went up there and got him out of there and got to safety and stuff. And then a couple months later, we went to Hawaii on a pre-scheduled trip, and I hadn't been photographing in Hawaii. And suddenly, I saw from this room that I was in, like people down on the beach, and it all felt like, I don't remember the famous photograph of somebody leaping from the towers. And it was on all the front pages, and that just haunted me. In fact, I had a picture of that pinned to my studio wall. And I saw the people down on the beach. I was on a 8th floor of a hotel looking down, and people were floating on their backs in the water, and they looked like the person falling from the building. I went, oh my God. This is like a way to, again, process, if you will, the trauma that we were all going through. So I started photographing them with that kind of that was kind of my starting point. I've been working at that same hotel for 20 years. I stay within a 3-foot radius on a hotel balcony and photograph. Life just comes in front of me. Everything you could possibly imagine happens. Paddle outs, which are when somebody dies who's a surfer. People take the ashes out on surfboards, create a circle, and do a little ritual for them. They have weddings there. I photographed baptism. Everything, just without me moving. I cannot tell you, I've made probably 100,000 photographs from that spot now. And it just keeps giving up new, beautiful metaphors about the world.
And I've seen those images of people floating in the water, and they look very peaceful. And yet there's something sort of eerie about them as well. Like maybe a big wave is going to come from out of frame, or they look so alone. You don't know where in the water they are. Vulnerable. Are they close to the shore, or are they really far out?
I purposely photographed them in a way where I didn't have the horizon line, so you didn't know where they are. Now I've actually recently, after all these years, I'm now photographing with the horizon line, and new things are being discovered, which I can't believe. Cargo ships are now coming into that same view, so anyway, it's just been wild.
If you had to choose a song for this season of life, what would it be?
So I think I told you that I taught my son how to play the guitar early on. So he plays the piano, clarinet, he plays violin, he plays everything. And he's now a musician, a composer. He has his own music company, immersive sound company. And he creates music. And every year, I think since 2010 for Christmas, he would make me a CD of the music he created that year. And in my studio, I have this player that plays 6 CDs, and I put all his CDs on there. And it is the soundtrack of my life. And it's so beautiful. And it's come so full circle, in so many ways. And his music just moves me. And it just...
What's his full name?
Jacob Bloomfield-Misrach.
And the song you chose is The Garden 2022.
Yeah.
I see just the hugest smile on your face. You're very proud.
You think so? What gave you a clue? Sorry. A little too much, maybe.
Not at all.
Okay.
That's 100% what this is about. And what do you hope people feel or think about when they come face to face with your work?
So, I have photographs of like the Golden Gate Bridge from my house that are just celebratory of that glorious piece of architecture, this glorious place that we call home. It's all about light and beauty. There's no subliminal dark message under there. It's just, that's what it is. There's other pictures like that I just are celebrating the world, but they also, I think, I don't want people to forget the other message. It's there. Some of my work is about the environment, and it's really important. I mean, we're really at that crisis mode, and we have to take it seriously. So I hope they're reminded of that all the time. I want them to see the beauty there and everything else, but I want them to just kind of be haunted a little bit about, what we have to lose here. Also with my work, there's some difficult things that we're not ready for yet, but they're very disturbing. I photographed Hurricane Katrina in 2005, and the main pictures that I did from that, nobody's seen yet. And I just give myself a standard of 20 years where we have a little distance so it's not so raw for people that are trying to recover from it. In 1991, I photographed the Oakland fire, and I put that work away for 20 years. And it wasn't until 2011 that the Oakland Museum and the Berkeley Art Museum showed that work for the first time. And I did 8 by 10 foot prints. Having that distance makes a difference.
How do you know when it's time, when we're ready to see the work?
Don't always know, but again, kind of like what I learned from Telegraph 3M, don't be part of the news with that stuff. Put it away for people to think about in the future, to learn from in the future. They're important historical facts. There's things to learn from those pictures.
Richard Misrach, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I actually love doing this with you.
Life in 7 Songs is a production from the San Francisco Standard. This episode was produced by me, Sophie Behrman, and our senior producer, Jasmine Morris. Our executive producers are Griffin Gaffney and John Steinberg. This episode was mixed by Michelle Lanz. Our theme music is by Kate Davis and Zubin Hensler, and Clark Miller created our show art. Our music consultant is Sarah Timbekshian. Special thanks to Sean McKenna with Pure Mind Studios. You can find this guest's full playlist at sf.news/Spotify. And if you want to see a lot of the art mentioned in the episode today, head over to our show notes. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.